The first thing we do is we see our recipients as people. Let me take you back to the very start of my email career in November 2011. And I remember it as though it was yesterday. The day I sent my very first email, which was really exciting. I uploaded my carefully crafted HTML and CSS and images into Silverpop, the ESP that we were using at the time. And the moment came when it was ready to send out into the big wide world. Really exciting. And it went. The button was pressed and it was time to wait and see what was going to happen to this thing that I'd created. And I remember leaving for work that day, thinking about what would happen, and then excitedly arriving into work the next morning and logging into Silverpop to open up the reports and see the data and what happened to this email. And what I discovered astonished me, because what I saw was real people with real lives and real feelings had interacted with this email that I'd created. My mind was literally blown. And the thing was, I couldn't see who these people were, and I couldn't hear what they had to say. And I therefore couldn't discriminate, nor would I want to discriminate against them. But something had happened. There'd been this connection between me, the creator and sender of this email, and they, the recipient of this email. An electric connection. I actually like to think of email, electronic mail, not as electronic mail, but actually electric mail, because there is this connection between the sender and the recipient. You see, in my career up until that point, previously as a web designer, and before that a graphic designer, in no part of my career had I come so close to the people that I was creating my work for. It was revolutionary for me. And so at that point, I made it my aim to deliver the greatest, best experience that I possibly could to these people who were taking the time and investing themselves in engaging and interacting with the emails that I was creating. In short, I was going to make email for all. So, we see our recipients as people. So how do we make email for all? Well, we make it easy for those people to interact with us. I coined the hashtag subscriber first, and it's been with me throughout my email career as a constant reminder to put the subscriber at the very forefront of my thinking and decision making, whether that's been to do with strategy or design or development or a combination of the three. And I recently revised that hashtag to be recipient first, because of course not all emails are subscriber based. Transactional emails, for example, are received on the basis of a purchase of a service or product. So I've constantly challenged myself on whether the decisions that I've made have been decisions that have made it harder or easier for people to interact with the emails that I've been creating and sending to them. I recently came across a book. It's been around for some time, you may even have a copy. And it's called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. And Don't Make Me Think, he writes, is his first law of usability. And this really encapsulates what I'm talking about here. Don't make them think. And I go further than that and say, don't make them do. Don't make the recipients do things that you can do for them in the design and development of the emails that you're creating for them. So I began to disregard practices that made it harder for people to interact with the emails that I was creating for them. Practices such as styling terms and conditions in small text or small print. Because this is a practice that comes from the printing industry, when there are a lot of terms and conditions to display, and they need to be in a small font so that they can all fit on. But of course, in email, you don't need to have that. There's plenty of space at the bottom of an email, and the text can be displayed in a normal size. And I began to embrace and introduce practices that made it easier for people to interact with the emails that I was creating. Such as considering how an email would display across different devices, on a desktop, on a tablet, on a mobile, and deciding whether it needed to be mobile first or desktop first, depending on the audience. So we make email for all by making it easy for those people to interact with us. So where do we start? Well, we start from where we are. And for me, that meant text. At the start of my email career, I was working in the fashion industry on emails that were very image heavy. And so I began to take text out of images. And what this meant was that text was crisper, it was clearer, it was easier to read. It also meant that text would reflow on mobile devices, and that would mean that it wouldn't be necessary to pinch and zoom to read an email. It also meant that calls to action were present in the email, regardless of whether images were switched off or there was a poor connection. And of course, being more text in the email, it meant that the emails were quicker to load as well. And I wrote about some of these practices in my ebook, A Type of Email, to help other designers and developers implement text into their emails. So we start from where we are. So what do we do next? Do we rest on our laurels? Give ourselves a pat on the back and say, well done, we've now created an email that's easier for people to interact with, and leave it at that? No, we take it to the next level. And for me, that meant accessibility. And I began to look at accessibility at a time when the email community was talking about it, but as far as I could see, nothing was being done about it. And so I did some research, and I looked at the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And what I discovered in those guidelines was that there were some things that were irrelevant for email. There were some things that were impractical for email, but there were some things that could be implemented into email. And I took those things and I talked about them in my session, A Type of Accessibility, at the Email Design Conference in 2015 in London, conference which is now known as Litmus Live, of course. And it's been great to see how the email community has embraced accessibility since that time. And indeed, this summit is a celebration of that. And so I've gone on to become an advocate for accessibility, which is the reason why I'm talking to you today. But even in that, I've not rested on my laurels, and I've sought other ways to make it easier for people to interact with the emails that I've been creating. So I designed and developed the accessibility switcher, which enables people to choose how they would like their emails to look. So they can change the font size, for example, and the background colour behind the text. So we take it to the next level. And you might say to me, well, Paul, that's all very well, but my subscribers, my recipients, only a tiny percentage of them, if any, are registered disabled or have any accessibility requirements. And my answer to you would be, implement accessibility regardless of what your data says. Because the truth is, your data won't tell you what challenges your recipients have. Take me, for example. I subscribe to emails, and I receive emails on the basis of purchases that I've made. But the data about me won't be everything about me that those companies have. Just like on the website for this summit, there's some data about me. You'll know, for example, that I'm the founder of Beyond the Envelope, and that I'm also the email specialist at Communities. But what the website won't tell you, and what those databases won't tell you, is that I'm diagnosed with epilepsy and have been since I was a child. And this means that I receive emails with content like this in, which I can't look at for more than a split second comfortably. Or emails with content like this in, which literally has me looking the other way. But the thing is, I don't consider myself as disabled. I take medication, which keeps everything under control, thankfully. But this does have a side effect. It slows down my thinking. And it means I'm forgetful at times. But if you were to ask me, do I have any special accessibility requirements, like I was and like you were when you registered for this summit, my default answer would be none. In the UK, 1% of the population are affected by epilepsy. That's around 678,000 people. And every day, 87 more people are being diagnosed with epilepsy. In the US, the percentage is 1.2, which amounts to 3.3 million people. Globally, that number is 65 million people. Next week is Purple Day, the 26th of March, a day to raise awareness for epilepsy in all its different forms. And Epilepsy Action is one of the charities that is involved in that. I've written an article myself on how epilepsy has affected me and how I've overcome it. And that's just one condition among many. I have some friends who have dyslexia, and they consider dyslexia as some kind of creative superpower. They don't see it as a disability. It's something that enables them to think in a certain way that others can't, and do things that others can't. But if you were to create an email with centered text, they would struggle to read it, because they would struggle to find the beginning of each line, which is why you align text left in an email. So we implement accessibility regardless of what our data says. Next, we need to consider the diverse nature of our recipients. And this is probably the root of most of the discussions and heated debates, certainly that I've had. We need to remember that we are not our recipients, and that there is more than one way for our recipients to interact with the emails that we create for them. And too many times I hear this word spoken, I, in phrases like this. I can read it on an email with very small text, and that would be fine if all the recipients had that person's 20/20 vision. Or phrases like this, I just pinch and zoom when being shown an email that's not responsive on a mobile device. And that might be fine if all the recipients had that person's dexterity or time and patience to navigate around an email that way. Or this one, I think it looks fine on my phone. And that might be fine if all the recipients were that person and not all the recipients had that phone. And this one, which is probably the one that rubs me up the most, can't they just change a setting here, do something there? And we need to stop making the email experience the recipient's responsibility. We need to challenge our own biases. And we need to ask ourselves, are we making it easier or harder for people to interact with the emails that we're creating for them? And we need to ask other people for their insight. There may be people in your teams who have challenges. There's been people that I've known in my teams that have had dyslexia, for example, and I've asked them how do they engage with that email. Is it difficult for them or is it easy for them? Can it be made better? And implementing things like the accessibility switcher to enable people to enlarge the text or change the contrast or change the background colour, so that we can disregard practices that make it harder for people and make it easier for people by introducing other practices. So we consider the diverse nature of our recipients. Finally, we recognise our brand is only as valuable as our recipient's experience of it. I mean, why go to all this trouble? Well, clearly the reason why you're watching is because you think it's the right thing to do. And it is. But it's also the brand thing to do. You see, a brand is more than a logo. Even though as a graphic designer I would say that logos are very important. And a brand is more than images. Even though as someone who deals with photography, I would say that images are very important. And a brand is more than fonts. Though as a typographer, I would say that fonts are very important. See, a brand is all about the experience. Take McDonald's, a globally recognised brand. It has its own logo, the Golden Arches, which is known throughout the world. Its photography of its products, and it even has its own font now, Speedy. So everything about McDonald's is about fast food. I recently took my daughter out to a youth club and I had to take her straight from work, so I didn't have time to eat. But I thought there's a McDonald's on the way, so I'll take her to the youth club, I'll drop her off, go back to McDonald's, get something to eat quickly, and then go and pick her up afterwards and take her home. So I went to the store, walked in to see what was on offer, and I saw the Grand Big Mac, and I thought, oh, that looks good, I'll have one of those. So I went to the touchscreen, made my order, waited for the ticket to come out. It didn't come out. I was a bit disappointed, but it was okay because I remembered the number. And then I went to queue. And I waited. 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 And it was 10 minutes before I received my order. It wasn't the fast food experience I was expecting. And then to add insult to injury, when I received the product and opened the box, it wasn't the Grand Big Mac that I was expecting. It certainly didn't look like the photograph that I'd seen. In fact, it was quite limp in the box. A somewhat diluted experience of McDonald's. You see, experience is everything. So when we are creating and delivering emails, sending them to our recipients, we need to ensure the experience that we're giving them is the best it can possibly be, whether they're using a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, or a mobile phone. So there's a commercial aspect to this, because your competitors are doing the same thing. And if we truly want to be accessible to the diverse, then we need to make sure we're doing all these things I've talked about today. We recognise our brand is only as valuable as our recipients' experience of it. So, as you go into the rest of this summit, let me give you some takeaways from my talk today to think about and consider as you go to each of the sessions. First of all, see your recipients as people and make it easy for those people to interact with you. Think about practices that you can disregard and practices that you can embrace to make email easy for those people. Start from where you are. Think of one thing right now that you can put your hands on and work with when you get back to your daily work. And then when you've done that, don't let it rest there. Take it to the next level. Implement accessibility regardless of what your data says. And consider the diverse nature of your recipients, remembering that you are not your recipients. And then recognise your brand is only as valuable as your recipient's experience of it. So go, enjoy the summit, and make some great email. Email for all. Thank you.